At 39, I thought I was too old for my little sister to humiliate me in front of an entire ballroom. Then I walked into her wedding, wearing the black dress she had personally chosen for me, and realized every member of our family was dressed in gold. Everyone except me. My mother wore champagne satin. My father had a gold tie. My aunts shimmered in bronze and honey. Even the cousins Madison usually complained about had been given matching gold pocket squares or dresses. I stood in the doorway in black. Madison stared at me for a second, lifted her champagne glass, and laughed. "Oh, Erin, black really is your color." One of her bridesmaids smiled into her drink. Madison turned toward them. "Gold is for people who actually have something to celebrate." A few people laughed. I kept walking. That was what I had trained myself to do around my family. Keep walking. Keep smiling. Don't give anyone the satisfaction of calling you sensitive. But Madison stepped directly into my path. Her shoulder struck mine. Her champagne glass tilted. Cold liquid splashed through the side of my hair, ran along my cheek, and darkened the front of my dress. For 1 second, the room disappeared behind the sound of my own breathing. Madison covered her mouth. "Oh my God." She sounded horrified. Then, she looked me up and down. And smiled. "Now you look like a wet black crow standing in the middle of a flock of peacocks." The laughter was louder that time. I looked at my mother. Not because I expected much, but apparently some part of me was still stupid enough to hope. Mom's eyes moved from the champagne dripping from my hair to Madison's white dress. Then she said, "Erin, don't make a scene. It's just champagne." I hadn't said a word. That was the part that stayed with me. I hadn't even opened my mouth. And somehow I was already the one in danger of ruining the wedding. Then the photographer called from the ballroom entrance. "Immediate family. Let's get the Walsh family together before dinner." I took the napkin someone handed me and pressed it against my hair. Dad was already walking toward the backdrop. Mom followed him. Madison hooked one arm through Dad's and glanced over her shoulder at me. I stepped toward them. She raised one hand. No, not yet." The photographer lowered his camera. Madison smiled. "Let's get the successful side of the family first." The room around us seemed to go very quiet. Then she pointed toward the edge of the ballroom. "Erin can wait." Dad looked directly at me. For half a second, I thought he might say something. Instead, he shifted closer to Madison. Mom adjusted his tie. The photographer lifted the camera again, and I stepped out of my own family photograph. I was still holding the damp napkin against my hair when a woman in a pale blue gown crossed the ballroom toward me. Margaret Shaw, the groom's mother. She stopped in front of me, looked at my face for a moment, then reached for my hand. "You're the consultant behind those manuals." 6 words. That was all it took. Across the room, my mother stopped smiling. I knew Margaret by sight, not by conversation. We had met twice before the wedding weekend. Once at the engagement dinner, where Madison had spent most of the evening introducing people according to their usefulness, and once at the rehearsal dinner the previous night. Margaret had always seemed observant in a quiet way. She didn't fill silences just because they existed. That made her very different from my family. I lowered the napkin from my hair. "I'm sorry?" "The compliance manuals." She frowned slightly. "Walsh Home Support." My stomach tightened. Behind her, Madison had turned away from the photographer. I saw her watching us. "I used to do some consulting work for the company," I said. Before Margaret could answer, Madison was suddenly beside us. "She used to help us," she said brightly, "back when everything was smaller." Margaret glanced at her. I thought her name was Still. "Erin has her own career now." Mom had joined us too. That quickly, she slipped one hand around Madison's elbow as though she'd merely wandered over to gather her daughter for another photograph. "Tonight is about Madison," she said. Margaret gave her a polite look. "I know." The photographer called for the bride again. Madison hesitated. For the first time all evening, she looked less amused than irritated. "Mom, I'm coming." Denise Walsh could communicate an entire instruction with the movement of her eyebrows. Madison understood. She went back toward the photography area. Mom followed. Margaret remained beside me. I watched my mother walk away. Something about the speed of her answer bothered me more than the answer itself. Margaret had spoken to me. Madison had answered first. Then Mom had shut the conversation down before I had even understood what it was about. That was not proof of anything. My job had taught me that long before it taught me regulations or documentation. Unease was not evidence. But it was often a reason to ask one more question. Mrs. Shaw? Margaret, please. Where did you see my name? Her expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough that I knew she was choosing her words. I worked in quality administration for a senior care organization before I retired, she said. We reviewed a lot of provider materials. Walsh Home Support crossed my desk at some point. What kind of materials? A capability packet, I think. Compliance information, training structure, policies. The champagne in my hair suddenly felt cold again. How long ago? She looked toward the ballroom, as if trying to place it. Within the last year, I believe. My contract with my mother's company had ended 14 months ago. I didn't tell Margaret that. Not yet. Was my name listed on it? That's why I recognized you. How? She hesitated again. You were presented as part of the compliance support. I felt something small and hard settle in the center of my chest. Current support? I don't remember the exact wording. That mattered. She didn't pretend otherwise. I don't want to tell you something I can't be certain of. Thank you. Aiden. That's enough. And it was. Margaret didn't need to become part of my family problem. She didn't need to obtain records for me. She didn't need to confront my mother or explain the law or expose anyone in the middle of a wedding reception. She had simply said something I had not expected. Now it was my responsibility to find out whether it meant anything. Margaret squeezed my hand once before letting go. You should probably dry your hair before the photographs. I almost laughed. I think I've been excused from those. Her mouth tightened. She glanced toward the backdrop where my parents stood on either side of Madison. Gold. 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 Then she looked back at me. Maybe that's their loss. I didn't answer. Compliments had always made me uncomfortable when they contradicted the story my family told about me. It was easier to believe the people who had known me longest, even when they were cruel. Especially then. I spent the next 20 minutes in the women's restroom with paper towels and a hand dryer. The champagne hadn't stained the black dress. Madison had been right about one thing. Black hid things well. A damp shoulder. A splash mark. The shape of a woman standing alone beside a family dressed in gold. When I was 17, Madison had broken the glass cover on a framed concert poster I had saved months to buy. She was 9. She had gone into my room after I told her not to. The frame fell. The glass shattered. I yelled. Madison cried. Mom came upstairs, looked at the broken frame, then at Madison's face, and said, Erin, she's 9. You scared her. I remember staring at her. She broke my picture. You're the older one. That sentence had ended 1,000 arguments in my childhood. You're the older one. Meaning I should understand. I should forgive. I should give up the front seat. I should lend the sweater. I should miss the party because Madison couldn't be alone. I should drive her. I should help her. I should know better. That night, Mom made me apologize for yelling. No one replaced the frame. Standing in the wedding restroom 22 years later, I realized I could still hear her voice perfectly. You're the older one. I had spent most of my life treating age like a debt I owed my sister. I dried the last section of my hair and looked at myself in the mirror. My cheeks were flushed. The dress fit me well. Better than I had expected when Madison sent me the link 3 months earlier with a message. Black will be the most flattering on you. I had known it was a dig. I had also bought it anyway. That was the part I didn't like admitting. There were different kinds of surrender. Some were dramatic. Others arrived with free shipping. I folded the wet paper towels and dropped them into the trash. Then I went back to the reception. Not because Mom wanted me there. Not because I planned to pretend nothing had happened. And not because I believed staying made me stronger than leaving. I went back because I refused to let Madison decide that humiliating me gave her the power to remove me from the room. I would leave when I wanted to leave. For once, that distinction mattered. Dinner was already being served. My place card was at a table near the back with 3 cousins, 2 distant family friends, and an elderly neighbor of the groom's parents. Immediate family sat at the long table near the dance floor. Of course they did. One of my cousins, Leah, looked at my damp hair. What happened? Champagne. Accident? I looked across the room at Madison. She was laughing at something her new husband had said. I haven't decided yet. Leah studied me for a second, then wisely changed the subject. 10 years earlier, I would have explained. I would have defended Madison before anyone accused her. She was stressed. It was her wedding. She didn't mean it. Mom had always praised me for doing that. Erin is reasonable. Erin understands people. Erin doesn't hold grudges. No one had ever asked what all that understanding cost me. Halfway through dinner, I saw Mom leave the head table. She came directly toward me. My body reacted before my mind did. Shoulders tight, back straight. The old preparation for correction. Mom stopped beside my chair. Can I speak to you? Leah suddenly became very interested in her plate. I stood. Mom led me toward the hallway outside the ballroom. What did Margaret say to you? Not? Are you okay? Not. I'm sorry Madison embarrassed you. Not even. Your hair dried nicely. Straight to Margaret. I folded my arms. She recognized my name. From what? I watched her face. You tell me. Mom exhaled. Eden. What? This is exactly what I was afraid of. I almost smiled. You were afraid the groom's mother would recognize me? You know what I mean. No, I don't. She lowered her voice. Whatever Margaret said, please do not turn this into some issue tonight. I stared at her. I had not accused her of anything. I had not mentioned the company. Yet here she was, telling me not to make an issue of something she supposedly didn't know about. What exactly would I be turning into an issue? Her jaw tightened. You know how you get about paperwork. There it was. My oldest family nickname without being a nickname. Difficult. Technical. Obsessive. Too serious. You know how Erin gets. At work, people paid me because I noticed what other people missed. At home, the same trait became a character defect, the moment noticing something made anyone uncomfortable. Margaret said she saw my name on company materials. Mom's eyes flicked toward the ballroom. Just once. Then back to me. You helped us. Past tense. Oh, for God's sake, when was the material updated? I don't know. What role was I listed under? I don't know. Then why are you telling me not to make an issue of it? Mom's voice hardened. Because I know you. That sentence landed harder than I expected. Because I knew her too. I knew how she arranged the world. Madison's feelings were fragile. Dad's health was delicate. The company was under pressure. Family events were important. And Erin could take it. Erin always took it. Mom reached toward my arm. I stepped back before she touched me. A tiny movement. But she noticed. So this is what you're doing now? What am I doing? Punishing us because Madison made a joke? This has nothing to do with the joke. It obviously does. No, it has to do with my name. Mom stared at me for 2 seconds. Then shook her head. I am not discussing business at Madison's wedding. Good. That seemed to surprise her. I'm going home. Her face changed immediately. Don't be ridiculous. I've stayed through dinner. People will notice. I looked past her at the ballroom doors. For most of my life, that sentence would have worked. People will notice. What will everyone think? Don't embarrass the family. I picked up my purse from the chair beside me. They already noticed me. I looked down at the black dress. That was kind of the point. And I walked away before she could tell me what my leaving meant about my character. My condo was 28 minutes from the venue. I knew because I watched the navigation clock count down while driving. 28 minutes during which no one needed anything from me. No calls. No paperwork. No Madison. At a red light, my phone buzzed. Mom. I let it ring. Then Madison. I let that ring too. A minute later came a text. Madison. Seriously? You couldn't even stay for the cake? I read it at the next light. Then put the phone face down. When I got home, I changed out of my shoes but kept the dress on. I poured myself water. Not wine. The last thing I wanted was another glass of alcohol anywhere near that dress. My home office was the smallest room in the condo. A narrow desk, 2 monitors, 1 bookcase, 3 banker boxes stacked against the far wall. 2 of them belonged to my family. Tax copies, old medical paperwork, business materials Mom had asked me to hang on to because you're organized. I looked at them, then opened my laptop. The folder took less than a minute to find. Walsh Home Support Consulting Engagement. There were people who cleaned their digital files because they enjoyed organization. I did it because my career had taught me that version history mattered. A document without a date was a memory. A document with a date could become a fact. I opened the signed consulting agreement. 6 months. Specific scope. Compliance framework modernization. Policy review. Training documentation. Vendor support. Then the final invoice. Then the handoff email. I read my own words. My engagement ends Friday, June 28. Future compliance decisions and document maintenance remain the responsibility of Walsh Home Support. Below it was Mom's reply. Understood. Thank you for everything. 4 words of gratitude. 1 word confirming the boundary. Understood. I checked the date. 14 months earlier. He sat back. Margaret could have remembered an old document. That was still possible. I opened Walsh Home Support's website. Madison was on the About page. A polished photograph, cream blazer, gold earrings. Her bio included. Madison Walsh helped lead the modernization of Walsh Home Support's internal systems and compliance culture. I felt heat move up my neck. But again, anger was not evidence. I kept looking. About page. Services. Resources. Partners. Then a downloadable PDF. Provider Capability Overview. Updated 6 weeks earlier. I downloaded it. Page 1. Company Profile. Page 2. Service Areas. Page 3. Quality Systems. I stopped. Under Compliance Support. Erin Walsh Compliance Advisor. I read it twice. Then a third time. No former. No dates. No qualification. Compliance Advisor. Current tense. My name. My credentials. A document updated 6 weeks before Madison's wedding. I didn't call Mom. That surprised me. Old Erin would already have had the phone in her hand. She would have demanded an explanation, while still angry enough to be manipulated by one. Instead, I created a new folder. Walsh Current Representation Review. I saved the PDF. I saved the URL. I saved a screenshot showing the date. Then, I copied my contract, handoff email, and Denise's understood into the same folder. Only after that did I notice the calendar notification in the corner of my screen. Tomorrow check Mom's company paperwork. A recurring reminder. Once a month. I had created it years earlier because Denise had a habit of remembering deadlines the evening before they were due. The consulting contract had ended 14 months ago. The reminder had not. I stared at it. Maybe that was the simplest version of my whole family. They had stopped officially employing me. I had never stopped preparing to rescue them. I clicked the reminder. Delete recurring event? My finger hovered over the mouse. I could almost hear Mom. But what if something gets missed? Then Dad. You're just better at this stuff. Then Madison. It takes you 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 1 evening. 1 weekend. 1 postponed application. 1 family emergency after another. I clicked delete all future events. The reminder disappeared. The screen looked strangely empty. Then I opened the capability PDF again. My contract had ended 14 months earlier. The document carrying my name had been updated 6 weeks ago. Someone had kept my name after they were done with me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to call and ask how I could fix it. Monday morning arrived with the particular cruelty of fluorescent office lighting and a full calendar. By 8:15, the wedding felt both 12 hours ago and several years away. My hair no longer smelled like champagne. The black dress was hanging in the back of my closet. The folder on my laptop, however, was still there. Walsh Current Representation Review. I did not open it when I sat down at my desk. That was deliberate. For years, anything involving my parents had been allowed to cut the line. A call from Mom could interrupt dinner. A text from Dad could move an appointment. A problem at Walsh Home Support could take a Saturday I had promised to myself. That morning, I had a client who actually paid for my attention. Lena Park dropped a printed policy packet beside my keyboard before our 9 o'clock call. "Something feels off," she said. Lena was my manager, though most days, the word felt less accurate than colleague. She was a compact woman in her early 50s, who read contracts as if they had personally offended her. I flipped through the packet. Which section? Training. The document was supposed to reflect a recent revision. The date on the first page was new. The footer was not. I stopped on page 18. "Here!" Lena leaned closer. The training schedule referred to a procedure that had been retired months earlier. "Wrong version?" she asked. Probably. Probably? I tapped the footer. "This revision number belongs to the older policy. Somebody updated the cover page without replacing the body." 5 minutes into the client call, that was exactly what we confirmed. Nobody had committed some spectacular crime. Nobody shouted. Nobody confessed. A coordinator had pulled the wrong file, changed the date, and assumed the document was current. A small mistake. The kind of mistake that became expensive only if nobody noticed it. When the call ended, Lena looked at me over the rim of her coffee cup. "You were quiet today. I found something this weekend." "At the wedding?" The question surprised me. Why would you assume the wedding? You've been staring at your phone like you expect it to accuse you of something. Despite myself, I smiled. Then the smile disappeared. "A former client may still be presenting me as active." Lena set her cup down. "Former client meaning your mother's company?" "Yes." "How sure are you?" "I found a public capability document updated 6 weeks ago. It lists me as compliance advisor." "And your engagement ended?" 14 months ago." She did not say, "You need a lawyer." She did not say, "Call them immediately." She asked the question I should have expected from her. "What do you know for certain?" The answer came more slowly. "That my contract ended. That Mom acknowledged it. That a recent public document still uses my name." "Anything else?" "No." "Then don't outrun your facts." I nodded. At work, that advice was obvious. At home, facts had always been expected to make room for feelings, hierarchy, and whatever version of events kept the peace. Lena picked up her coffee. "So what are you going to do?" "Find out how far it goes before I correct anything." "Good." That was all. She walked away. No rescue. No strategy handed to me. No promise that everything would be fine. Just enough room for my own judgment to matter. Around noon, I opened the archive folder. The oldest files pulled me backward before I could stop them. When Madison was 4, I was 12. That 8-year gap had been treated like a natural law in our house. I was old enough to understand, old enough to help, old enough to know better. After school, I heated soup, while Madison sat at the kitchen counter drawing horses with purple legs. I checked her spelling words. I found her shoes. I learned how to braid hair badly because Mom came home late twice a week, and Madison hated sleeping with it tangled. "You're my responsible girl," Mom used to say. Back then, it felt like being chosen. At 14, responsibility meant missing the last hour of a friend's birthday because Madison had a fever and Dad was stuck at work. At 16, it meant driving her to dance class the week after I got my license. At 18, it meant filling out forms because Mom said, "You understand this stuff better than I do." The duties changed as I got older. The sentence underneath them did not. "You're the older one." I moved out at 24. That detail mattered now, in a way it had not mattered then. Nobody had kept me dependent. I found my first full-time compliance job in Philadelphia, rented a small apartment with terrible plumbing, bought my own furniture, paid my own insurance, and built a life where no one had a key unless I gave them one. Physical distance should have ended the role. Instead, it became easier to disguise. Mom stopped saying, "You have to." She learned to say, Could you just look at this?" Could you just come by? Could you just help Madison understand? Could you just explain this insurance letter to Dad? It sounded like choice. The guilt came after. One Sunday evening, years after I had moved out, I had just put pasta on the stove when Denise called. Please tell me you're home. I'm home. Thank God. My stomach tightened before I even knew the problem. Walsh Home Support had received a vendor questionnaire back, with multiple sections marked incomplete. I don't know what they want, Mom said. I've read it 3 times. Send it to whoever handles your compliance. There was a pause. We don't really have someone for that yet. Then, whoever handles operations. Another pause. Aiden. I closed my eyes. What do you need? The question slipped out so naturally that I did not notice what I had surrendered by asking it. An hour later, I was sitting at my parents' dining table with a laptop open and cold pasta still in the pot at my apartment. The questionnaire itself was not difficult. Their supporting materials were the problem. Training references did not match. A policy title had changed, but the checklist had not. Several documents had no clean version history. Mom hovered near my shoulder. Can you fix it? I can tell you what needs to be fixed. Same thing. It really isn't. She kissed the top of my head. You always fix things. I stayed until almost midnight. The next morning, Denise sent the corrected packet. The vendor accepted it. Madison had been at a networking event that evening. Nobody blamed her for not being there. Why would they? Madison was good with people. I was good with problems. It had taken me years to notice that one of those talents was celebrated and the other was consumed. The email archive shifted again. Another year. Another crisis. Dad's surgery. Robert had always been healthier than his age suggested, which meant his first major operation frightened all of us more than we admitted. Around the same time, I had been accepted into a professional development program in Boston. It was not a degree. It was not a life-changing fellowship. It was simply an opportunity I wanted. That almost made it harder to defend. I remembered sitting at Mom's kitchen table, with the acceptance email open on my phone. I leave next month, I said. Mom smiled. That's wonderful. For a few seconds, I let myself enjoy it. Then she looked toward the living room, where Dad was asleep in his recliner. I just don't know how he'll manage. He should be much better by then. Oh, I'm sure. Her fingers folded and unfolded the corner of a dish towel. And Madison freezes with medical things. You know how she is. I can show her the schedule. Of course. Mom's voice became painfully gentle. You should go, Aaron. I would never ask you not to. She did not have to. By bedtime, I had already begun constructing reasons to withdraw. Dad needed consistency. Mom was exhausted. Madison was anxious. There would be another program. A good daughter did not leave when everyone needed her. I declined the place 3 days later. Nobody celebrated the sacrifice because nobody had technically asked for it. That was the brilliance of the system. They had trained me well enough to make the sacrifice myself. The realization left me sitting motionless at my desk until my computer screen dimmed. I touched the trackpad. My reflection vanished. The folder returned. Walsh Home Support. By early afternoon, the trail reached the 6-month consulting agreement. That contract had been the first time I made my mother angry by treating work as work. 2 years earlier, Denise had called about rebuilding the company's compliance framework. By then, I had learned enough to recognize the difference between helping someone read a confusing letter and taking professional responsibility for a business system. How much work? I asked. A few weeks. What exactly needs to be done? We need the manuals cleaned up, training procedures, some vendor stuff. That's not a few weeks. You haven't even looked at it. I know what you just described. She gave the small sigh that had been making me feel selfish since childhood. I thought you'd want to help us grow. I do. Then why are you making this difficult? I'm asking for a scope. Silence. Then she said, we have to sign contracts with our own daughter now? Yes. The word had made my hands shake. I remembered that. I had been sitting alone in my condo, gripping the phone as though my mother could see the betrayal in my face. Yes, I said again. If you want professional compliance work, we need a professional agreement. Dad called an hour later. Your mother thinks you don't trust her. This isn't about trust. You know how she takes things. That sentence almost did the job. Almost. But I had already spent enough evenings cleaning up verbal agreements that nobody remembered the same way. The contract was signed. 6 months. Defined services. Defined payment. Defined end date. I built the manuals, standardized the document structure, created a simple version control system, helped organize training records, supported several vendor questions. Then, I handed everything over. The final email was still there. My engagement ends Friday. Future compliance decisions and document maintenance remain the responsibility of Walsh Home Support. Mom's response sat beneath it. Understood. Thank you for everything. I stared at that word again. Understood. Not vague. Not emotional. Not. We assumed you would still help if needed. Understood. I opened the current capability packet beside it. Compliance Advisor. Aaron Walsh. My shoulders went rigid. The anger was cleaner this time. Less like humiliation. More like arithmetic. 1 + 1 did not equal whatever story they wanted me to accept. I moved to the public about page. Madison's photograph appeared near the top. Cream blazer, gold earrings, the easy smile that always looked natural in photographs. Her bio said she had helped lead the modernization of Walsh Home Support's internal systems and compliance culture. My fingers stopped on the trackpad. Helped lead. I opened one of my original manuals. Then a current public summary. The structure was mine. Some language had been updated, as it should have been. The system had evolved. But the bones were still recognizable. For several minutes, the obvious explanation was the one I wanted. Madison. She had always liked the visible part of things. The presentation. The praise. The moment somebody said, "This looks wonderful." At the wedding, she had made sure everyone saw me as the woman in black while she stood in gold. Now her biography seemed to be doing the same thing to our work. I started composing a message to her. What exactly did you tell people you built? I deleted it before sending. That question would satisfy my anger. It would not protect my name. Instead, I opened a blank email addressed to the main company account. I wrote slowly. I confirmed the date my consulting engagement had ended. I stated that I was not currently employed, contracted, or retained as compliance advisor. I asked that public and vendor-facing materials be reviewed and corrected where they suggested an active role. I made one thing explicit. I was not asking the company to stop using deliverables it had properly obtained during my engagement. The manuals were theirs. My current professional identity was not. I read the message twice. Then a third time. No accusation. No mention of the wedding. No claim I could not prove. I pressed send. The phone rang 11 minutes later. Madison. I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I answered. What did you send, Mom? An email about the company. On the Monday after my wedding? The timing isn't about your wedding. She laughed once, sharply. Of course it is. The wedding is how I found out. Found out what? That you helped with the manuals? Everybody knows that. That isn't what I wrote. What did you write? You can read the email. Aaron, you're acting insane. My jaw tightened. What role does the capability packet list for me? Silence. Then, I don't know. Compliance advisor. So? My contract ended 14 months ago. You gave us the manuals. I'm not asking you to stop using them. Then what is the problem? The problem is that I'm being presented as responsible for work I'm not doing. Madison exhaled into the phone. You always do this. Do what? Take something simple and make it technical. The old insult almost worked because it sounded so much like truth. I was technical. I did care about wording. I did ask more questions than the rest of them. But those qualities were not defects, merely because they had become inconvenient. Please respond to the email if you're authorized to speak for the company, I said. What? If you aren't, Mom can respond. Are you serious? Yes. I ended the call. My hand trembled afterward. That irritated me. I wanted boundaries to feel powerful. Mostly, They felt like standing outside in cold weather without the coat I had always used. The phone rang again before I could put it down. Mom. This time I answered because the email was directed to her company. Iden. Her tone was quiet. Much worse than shouting. What is this? A correction request. You made your point at the wedding. I didn't make any point at the wedding. Your sister is crying. I looked at the office wall. There it was. The door I had walked through all my life. Madison is upset. Therefore, Erin must fix something. I'm asking about business materials. You humiliated her the day after her wedding. I emailed the company account. You know that comes to me. Yes. And you knew how this would look. How what would look? Like you're trying to take credit away from your sister. A pulse beat behind my eye. I asked to have a current role removed because I do not currently hold it. After everything we've done for you. The leap was so familiar I almost missed it. Business document. Family loyalty. Professional boundary. Childhood debt. All tied into one knot. Mom, please respond to the email. Do you have any idea what it would cost us to replace the kind of support you gave? That sentence silenced me. Not because it hurt. Because it answered something. She knew the work had value. She had always known. I sat straighter. That's something the company needs to budget for. The quiet on the other end lasted 3 seconds. Listen to yourself. I am. You sound like a stranger. No. I sound like someone who finished a contract 14 months ago. Mom inhaled. Erin. There are employees who depend on this company. Clients. Your father and I have put everything into it. Madison has put years into building relationships. You cannot suddenly decide none of that matters because your feelings were hurt at a wedding. I didn't say none of that matters. Then stop doing this. Doing what? This. She had no noun for it. That helped. I'm going back to work, I said. Iden. Please respond in writing. Do not hang up on me. The old command went through me like electricity. For a second, I was 17 again, standing beside a broken picture frame, waiting to be told what apology would restore peace. Then I looked at the clock on my monitor. I had a client call in 6 minutes. A client whose work was actually mine. I'll read your response when you send it. I ended the call. The silence afterward felt enormous. I put my phone face down. Then I opened my calendar and joined the meeting on time. That evening, back at my condo, the banker boxes along the wall seemed more intrusive than they had the night before. I did not open them. Not yet. Instead, I made dinner and ate it while it was hot. A ridiculously small achievement. Still, I noticed. Afterward, I opened a browser bookmark I had ignored for almost 3 years. Postgraduate Certificate in Healthcare Quality and Compliance Leadership. I had saved the page the first time the program interested me. Then Dad needed surgery. Then Mom needed help. Then Walsh Home Support needed the 6-month overhaul. There had always been a reason to wait until life calmed down. I clicked apply. The first page asked for my name. Erin Walsh. For once, Walsh meant only me. I filled in my contact information. Education. Employment. I reached the section asking for a statement of professional goals and stopped. Not because I did not have any. Because I had spent so long organizing other people's next steps that writing down my own felt almost indecent. My phone chimed. For a moment, I expected another message from home. It was an email. The sender was a regional care network I recognized by name, but had never personally worked with on behalf of Walsh Home Support. The subject line read, Confirmation of Compliance Support. I opened it. The message was polite. Routine almost. They were reviewing Walsh Home Support for a planned network expansion and wanted to confirm whether I would remain available to provide compliance support during the upcoming growth period. I read the question twice. Then I looked across the room at the application still open on my second screen. This was no outdated website line. Somebody outside my family was making a business decision based on the belief that I was still standing behind Walsh Home Support, and someone had given them a reason to believe it. The email from the regional care network sat open on my screen long after I had finished reading it. They were not asking whether I had once helped Walsh Home Support. They were asking whether I would remain available during an upcoming expansion. That one word changed everything. Remain. You could only remain in a role if someone believed you were already in it. I read the message again, then opened the consulting agreement beside it. The dates were still the dates. My 6-month engagement had ended 14 months earlier. Denise had acknowledged the handoff. Nothing in the contract promised emergency support, informal oversight, or some permanent obligation to stand behind the company because I shared its owner's last name. For several minutes, I let the obvious response form in my head. Who told you that? Then, I deleted it. The network representative did not owe me an investigation. They had asked a straightforward business question. I could answer the part that belonged to me. I typed slowly. I confirmed the date my consulting engagement had ended. I stated that I was not currently retained by Walsh Home Support, that I did not provide ongoing compliance oversight, and that I had not agreed to support the proposed expansion. Nothing more. No accusation. No reference to the wedding. No sentence beginning with, "My mother has always." Before sending it, I read every line as if someone else's name were attached. Then I pressed send. The relief lasted less than 10 minutes. Dad called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but Robert rarely called during business hours unless Denise had already tried him first. I answered. "Hi, Dad." His voice was careful. "Can we talk?" "We're talking. I mean in person." I stared at the regional network email. "About the company?" "A pause. Your mother asked me to see if you'd come over." That answer told me 2 things. First, Denise did not want another written exchange. Second, Dad was doing what he had done for most of my adult life, standing in the hallway between us and calling it peacekeeping. What does she want to discuss? She thinks everyone is talking past each other. I asked a question in writing. I know. Has she answered it? Another pause. Not exactly. I leaned back in my chair. What time? He sounded relieved too quickly. 7? I can be there at 7. Thank you, Aaron. I'm not agreeing to anything, Dad. I didn't say you were. No. I'm saying it so there isn't confusion later. Silence stretched between us. Then he said quietly, 7. I hung up and added the meeting to my calendar. For years, I would have left the rest of the evening blank afterward. Family conversation meant recovery time. Maybe dinner would run long. Maybe Mom would get upset. Maybe Madison would arrive. Maybe someone would need help with something unrelated. And I would stay because leaving felt rude. This time, I set an end time. 7 to 8:30. At 8:30, I had somewhere else to be, even if that somewhere was simply home. The dining room looked exactly as it had the last time I sat there doing work for Walsh Home Support. Same long oak table. Same shallow scratch near Dad's seat. Same ceramic bowl in the center. That Mom filled with lemons because she once read they made a house look welcoming. Denise was already seated when I arrived. Madison sat across from her. Dad stood near the kitchen doorway with a coffee mug even though it was evening. No one offered me one. That, more than anything, told me this was not really a family visit. I pulled out a chair. Denise spoke first. "I'm glad you came. I said I would." Madison crossed her arms. She had changed since the wedding, only in the practical sense. No white dress, no veil, no crowd laughing around her. The expression was familiar, defensive before anyone had accused her. Mom folded her hands on the table. "This whole thing has gotten much bigger than it needed to." "What whole thing?" she sighed. "The network, the emails, everything." I put my phone face down beside me. "Then let's make it smaller." Denise frowned. I continued. "Who told the network I would remain available for compliance support?" No one spoke. Dad looked toward Denise. Madison looked toward Mom too. That old family reflex would have been almost funny if it had not answered so much. Denise leaned back. "Nobody lied to anyone. That wasn't my question. You built the system." "Yes. You know it better than anyone." "Probably. You've always been available if we needed clarification." I held her gaze. "Who told them I would remain available during the expansion?" Her mouth tightened. "They know you were involved." Past tense. "Oh, Erin." Madison pushed her chair back an inch. You're acting like they put your name on the building. They told an outside organization I was supporting work I never agreed to support. No one said you were doing the day-to-day stuff, Madison said. You've seen the packet? Her face changed. Only slightly. Enough. I've seen some materials. What materials? Company materials. Which ones? God. She threw both hands up. This is exactly what I mean. Every conversation with you turns into an interrogation. I did not answer that. Instead, I looked at Denise. Did you tell the network I was available? Mom's voice went colder. You're not going to sit in my house and talk to me like I'm under oath. There it was again. A factual question became disrespect the moment the answer became uncomfortable. Dad stepped in. Can everybody just slow down? I looked at him. I asked one question. I know. Do you know the answer? His fingers tightened around the mug. No. That was at least honest. For a moment, the room went quiet enough that I could hear the refrigerator humming through the doorway. The sound pulled me backward. Not to childhood. To the year of Dad's surgery. I had sat at that same table with my laptop open and my Boston acceptance email glowing on the screen. I leave next month, I had told Mom. She smiled immediately. That's wonderful. I remembered the rush of relief. I had expected resistance and received approval. Then Denise looked toward the living room, where Dad had been sleeping in his recliner. I just don't know how he'll manage. I had stared at her. He should be much better by then. Oh, absolutely. She folded the corner of a dish towel between her fingers. And Madison freezes with medical things. You know that. I can make her a schedule. Of course. A small smile. You should go, Erin. I would never ask you not to. 3 days later, I turned down Boston. Nobody had forbidden me. Nobody had threatened me. No one had needed to. The refrigerator hummed again, and I was back at 39. Sitting in the same room. Looking at the same woman. I had spent years telling myself that our crises were unlucky. Dog got sick. The business needed help. Madison struggled. Something always happened. But systems did not have to be malicious to become permanent. If every emergency ended with me showing up, no one else had much reason to build a world where Erin was unnecessary. Madison's voice cut through the thought. Fine. She picked up her phone. You want to know what happened? I'll show you what I have. Denise turned sharply. Madison. What? Madison snapped. She clearly thinks I did all of this. I had not actually said that. But she was right about what I had believed. Since the wedding, every ugly piece had pointed toward her easily. The dress. The photograph. The bio claiming modernization. Her immediate interruption when Margaret spoke. Madison scrolled through her email. I wasn't handling this stuff. Which stuff? I asked. The network packet. She tapped the screen several times, then forwarded something. My phone buzzed on the table. I did not open it immediately. Where did this email come from? Mom copied me because marketing needed the updated bios. Denise's voice sharpened. You're taking this completely out of context. Then Erin can read the context, Madison said. I opened the message. The chain was several months old. A marketing contractor had asked whether the compliance section should still include my name. Denise's reply sat directly beneath the question. Keep Erin's name on the compliance section for now. Partners know her work. My fingers went still around the phone. For now, not an accidental forgotten line. Not a website nobody had updated. A choice. I scrolled. Later in the same thread, the contractor asked for approval of leadership bios. Madison's draft described her as having helped lead the modernization of Walsh home support systems and compliance culture. Denise replied, Looks great. Keep the focus on Madison's role in moving us forward. I read both messages again. One kept me in the compliance section because outsiders trusted my work. The other moved Madison to the center of the story because she represented the company's future. Neither sentence alone told me everything. Together, they told me enough. I looked across the table. You knew my name was still there. Denise's face hardened. I knew your work was still there. That is not the same thing. You created those materials. The company owns the deliverables. The company does not own a current role I don't hold. Mom pushed her chair back slightly. Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds when we are talking about your own family? No. My answer came so quickly that everyone stopped. For once, I did not soften it. It sounds normal when we're talking about professional work. Madison rubbed both palms over her face. I told you. I thought Mom had cleared it with you. I turned toward her. When? What? When did you think she cleared it with me? I don't know. At some point. Did I ever tell you that? No. Did you ask? Her eyes narrowed. Why would I ask? Because my name was being used. You always helped. The words landed differently now. Not because Madison meant them cruelly. That almost made them worse. She had grown up in the same system I had. I helped. Therefore, I would help. I had always been there. Therefore, I was available. Mom needed Aaron. Therefore, Aaron belonged to the need. I looked back at Madison's bio. Did you know the marketing copy made it sound like you developed the compliance system? Her expression changed again. It says I helped lead modernization. Did you write the manuals? No. Did you build the version control system? No. Did you design the training documentation? No. Madison's voice rose. I worked on rollout. I worked with clients. I helped with communications. You hate that stuff. I never said you did nothing. Then what do you want from me? The truth. She gave a short laugh. You don't even like publicity, Aaron. There it was. A sentence so ordinary that it almost slipped past me. I don't like publicity. Therefore, I don't need credit. I don't like attention. Therefore, someone else can stand where my work is being praised. I am competent in private. Therefore, private is where I belong. I thought of the wedding photograph. Just the Gold family first. The same arrangement in a different costume. Madison in the frame. Me behind the system making the frame possible. I turned to Denise. You wanted both versions. Mom's eyes narrowed. What versions? When people needed a face for the company, Madison modernized everything. That is not what the bio says. When partners needed technical credibility, my name stayed in compliance. You're twisting this. I'm reading your emails. Denise stood. Her palms pressed against the table. Do you think I built this business to steal something from you? I didn't say that. You're implying it. I'm saying you kept my name on current materials after my contract ended. We paid you for the work. Yes. So what exactly are you accusing me of? I'm not accusing you of owning the manuals. My voice stayed quieter than hers. I'm telling you that you cannot tell other people I'm available when you haven't asked me. Dad finally set his mug down. Denise, if Aaron's name is still listed as current, maybe it should just be corrected. Mom looked at him as if he had changed teams during a game. You have no idea how these packets work. That's true, he said. It was probably the most useful thing Robert had said all evening. He did not pretend expertise he did not have. Denise looked back at me. This could hurt all of us. Correcting my role? Creating doubt. If accurate information creates doubt, I'm not the one creating the problem. Madison leaned forward. You know this expansion matters. I know. Then why do this now? Because I found out now. You could wait. For what? Until things settle down. The words pulled a cold line through me. Until things settle down. Boston. Dad's surgery. The business. The wedding. There had always been a later date when I was supposed to start belonging to myself. It never arrived because somebody else always had something more urgent. I picked up my phone and opened a blank note. Denise stared at it. What are you doing? Changing how we handle this. Her face went still. From now on, anything about Walsh Home Support comes to me in writing. Why? So there's no confusion. We don't need a paper trail between mother and daughter. I do. Between a company and someone whose professional name it's using. Mom scoffed. That is unbelievably cold. I'm not taking ad hoc compliance calls anymore. Aiden. No quick questions. No can you just look at this. No sending me a document 5 minutes before a deadline. Madison stared at me. You're serious? Yes. Dad spoke carefully. What happens if there's something only you understand? The company hires someone who understands it. Denise gave a small, stunned laugh. You would make us pay somebody for something you could answer in 5 minutes? I looked at her. Yes. That single word changed the room. Not dramatically. No one shouted. No glass shattered. but I watched all three of them absorb an idea they had apparently never considered real. Access to me could end. I continued. I'm also going to disclose the situation to my employer, so my professional record is clear. Mom's face lost color. You're telling your job? I'm telling them that a former client may still be presenting me as active. You're making us sound dishonest. No. I'm telling them what I can document. Same thing. It isn't. Madison stood too. This is insane. I checked the time. 8:22. 8 minutes before the end, I had set for myself. I put my phone into my bag. Denise stared at me. You're leaving? At 8:30. Since when do you schedule family conversations? I slid my chair back. Since tonight. Dad followed me to the front hallway. He waited until Denise and Madison were out of earshot. You know your mother is scared. I know. She has a lot riding on this expansion. I know. She shouldn't have left your name there. I looked at him. For half a second, hope rose before I could stop it. Then he added, but maybe you don't have to push all of this at once. There it was. The familiar compromise. Yes, they were wrong. But could I absorb the correction more gently? Could I delay my boundary until everyone else was comfortable with it? I'm not stopping the expansion, Dad. I know. I'm correcting my role. I know. Then what are you asking me to wait for? He looked toward the dining room. I did not need him to answer. I hugged him before leaving, because I still loved him. That was another thing I was beginning to understand. Boundaries did not require me to stop loving people. They required me to stop using love as a reason to abandon myself. 2 mornings later, the regional network replied. They thanked me for the clarification and said they had received conflicting information regarding Walsh Home Support's compliance support structure. Before completing the planned expansion credentialing, they would need updated information about current responsibility, staffing, and the materials in which my role had been represented. Nothing about closing the company. Nothing about state regulators. Nothing about licenses. Their existing business remained exactly what it had been. The expansion simply could not move forward until the contradiction was resolved. I saved the email in my folder. Then I went back to work. That afternoon, the postgraduate application remained open in another browser tab. I completed the employment section. Then I reached the statement of purpose again. The blank box had stopped me before. This time, I typed the first sentence. I wanted to deepen the work I had spent years doing for everyone else. I stared at the line. Too personal. I almost deleted it. Instead, I left it there and kept writing. At 5:30, my phone rang. Dad. I answered as I packed my laptop. The network paused the expansion review, he said. I know they asked for clarification. Your mother says the new contracts could be delayed. That sounds possible. He exhaled. Aaron, there are employees whose hours may depend on growth. The guilt landed exactly where it had been designed to land. Real people. Real paychecks. Not Mom. Not Madison. People who had nothing to do with our family dynamic. For several seconds, I saw the path back. I could answer a few questions. Review a packet. Attend a meeting. Help them designate the right person. Make the uncertainty smaller. Then I remembered the email. Keep Erin's name on the compliance section for now. Partners know her work. They had already spent the value of my involvement before asking whether I wanted to give it. Dad, I said, I'm not asking the network to delay anything. I know. I'm not telling them not to work with Walsh. I know. I'm telling them I don't hold a role. I don't hold. He went quiet. Then he said the sentence I had heard in one form or another for most of my life. You always fix things. My hand stopped on the zipper of my laptop bag. Once, those words had made me feel loved. Now I heard the other half. So fix this too. I closed the bag. I used to. He inhaled softly. I did not take it back. That evening, I met my friend Claire for dinner. She had invited me 3 weeks earlier. I had almost canceled twice. The first time, because of wedding preparations. The second, because of the company mess. Instead, I arrived 10 minutes early. Claire noticed immediately. Who are you? And what have you done with Aaron Walsh? I laughed. That bad? You once texted me from a parking lot that you'd be 20 minutes late because your mom couldn't find an insurance form. She eventually found it under her printer. I remember. My phone buzzed inside my purse. I knew the vibration pattern. A call. I did not check who it was. Claire glanced toward the bag, then back at me. Aren't you going to get that? No. Everything okay? I picked up the menu. It will be for the next hour. The phone rang again. Then stopped. For the first time in years, I ate an entire dinner while it was still hot without solving anyone's problem between courses. When I got home, there were 2 missed calls from Dad and 1 voicemail. I listened while standing in my kitchen. Aaron, it's me. Your mother says the network wants a review meeting before they'll move ahead. She isn't asking you to come back to the company. She just wants you there to explain the system. I closed my eyes. Dad continued. You don't even have to do anything. Just sit in the room. The voicemail ended. I stood very still. They had found the smallest possible version of my labor. Not 6 months. Not 90 days. Not a manual. Not even an answer. Just my body in a chair. My name attached to the room. My presence lending credibility to a system I no longer controlled. I looked toward the closed laptop on my dining table, where my expired contract waited inside a folder. For years, they had treated my time like it was free, because I gave it freely. Now, they wanted my presence for the same price. And I knew exactly what would happen if I walked into that meeting. The voicemail stayed on my phone until the next morning. Not because I needed to hear it again. Because deleting it felt too much like pretending the request had never been made. Just sit in the room. I had spent most of the night thinking about how little that sounded like. No contract. No title. No responsibility. Just my name, my face, and the unspoken assumption that anyone sitting across the table would see me there and believe Walsh Home Support still had access to the person who built its compliance framework. By 8:30, I was at my desk with coffee cooling beside my keyboard. Lena stopped at the opening of my office. You look like you slept in a conference room. Close. She glanced at the screen. Something changed? They want me at the network review. In what capacity? That's the interesting part. Apparently, I don't have to do anything. Lena's eyebrows lifted. That sounds like doing something. Exactly. I told her about Dad's voicemail. Not the whole history. Not the wedding. Not Madison's champagne or Mom's face when Margaret recognized me. Just the facts that mattered professionally. My former client had represented me as available during an expansion process. I had corrected my current status. The network had paused the next step pending clarification. Now the company wanted me physically present at a review meeting without restoring a formal role. Lena pulled out the chair across from me. What are you planning to do? I'm not going. The words came out before I had time to test how they felt. They felt frightening. They also felt true. Lena nodded once. Then make sure your own record is clean. That was the conversation. No one called my parents. No one threatened the company. No one told me whether I was a good daughter. I opened a chronology I had started the night before and pushed it toward Lena. She read the first page quietly. Then she tapped one sentence. You wrote, my mother deliberately kept my name on the materials after I left. Yes. Can you prove deliberately? I opened my mouth. The email from the marketing contractor came to mind. Keep Erin's name on the compliance section for now. Partners know her work. Yes. Lena waited. I looked at the sentence again. The problem was not whether I believed it. The problem was what that sentence claimed about Denise's intent. I can prove she approved keeping it there. Different sentence. I deleted deliberately. The new line read, my name remained on company and vendor-facing materials published after my engagement ended, including materials Denise Walsh approved after the end date. Cleaner. Stronger. Somehow. Less emotional language left less room for anyone to call the facts emotional. Lena moved to the next paragraph. What about this? I read it. My family continued to depend on me informally. I shook my head before she spoke. That doesn't belong. Why? Because it's true in my life, but it isn't the issue I'm disclosing. I deleted it. What remained fit on 2 pages. My engagement start date. My scope. The handoff. The end date. Denise's written acknowledgement. The more recent capability packet. The network inquiry. My response. Nothing about who loved whom. Nothing about who laughed at a wedding. For once, separating work from family did not make the family part less real. It simply stopped them from using one to blur the other. Lena slid the pages back. That's yours to keep. What does that mean? It means you know what you know. You've documented it. You don't need to decorate it. I looked down at the timeline. For years, I had explained myself until my own point disappeared under all the reasons I understood everyone else. This was different. 2 pages. Dates. Documents. No apology. I saved the file. Then I disclosed the situation through the appropriate internal process at my firm. Not because anyone had accused me of misconduct, because I did not want my employer learning later that a former client had been presenting me as active while I said nothing. The acknowledgement came back before lunch. My information had been received. If more clarification was needed, they would ask. That was it. No disaster. No dramatic meeting. No one marched me out with a cardboard box. I sat there, looking at the message, and realized how much of my fear had belonged to another part of my life. At home, questions were punishment. At work, accurate disclosure was simply part of being responsible. The difference should not have felt revolutionary. It did. Mom arrived at my condo that evening without warning. I saw her through the peephole holding a blue folder. For several seconds, I considered pretending I was not home. Then I opened the door, but did not step aside. Hey, are you going to let me in? What's in the folder? Her mouth tightened. A solution. That word had always had a dangerous effect on me. Solutions were my weakness. Problems made my brain reach forward before my heart had caught up. I opened the door wider. 20 minutes. Mom stared at me. You're timing me now? I have plans. That was not entirely true. My plan was to work on my postgraduate application and make dinner. But those counted. I stepped aside. She walked into the living room and placed the folder on the coffee table. Your father told me what you said. I told Dad I wasn't going to the meeting. He said you wouldn't even consider it. I considered it. That's not what it sounds like. Mom sat down. I remained standing for another moment before taking the chair across from her. She opened the folder. A contract lay inside. The sight of it startled me. Not because contracts frightened me, because this was what I had asked for years ago. Professional work treated professionally. She pushed it across the table. There. I looked at the first page. A short-term consulting agreement. 90 days. Compensation stated clearly. Scope included network credentialing support, review of compliance documentation, transition assistance, and help identifying a permanent compliance resource. For one dangerous second, I felt vindicated. They were willing to pay. Not a favor. Not 5 minutes. Not because I was the oldest daughter. A real agreement. A real rate. Mom watched my face. You said work is work. Fine. We're treating it like work. My fingers rested on the edge of the paper. What changed? The network made it clear they want answers. So, you want to hire me. We need somebody who understands what you built. That was almost an acknowledgement. Almost enough to make the old part of me lean forward. I turned the page. The effective date was immediate. I read the scope again. Then, the first paragraph. Then the opening date. A cold clarity settled over me. If I sign this tonight, I become your active consultant tonight. Yes. And then you can tell the network I'm supporting the expansion. You would be. Going forward. Mom's expression tightened. What difference does that make? The difference between now and 2 months ago. She leaned back. I don't understand why you are determined to make this harder than it has to be. I tapped the contract. This doesn't answer why they were told I was available before you asked me. No one is asking you to lie. You're asking me to step into the role after the fact and let everyone move on without correcting how we got here. We are correcting it. That is what this is. No, this fixes your staffing problem from today forward. Mom's patience slipped. So it does not turn yesterday into the truth. She stared at me. I heard my own pulse in the quiet room. The contract was reasonable in isolation. That was what made it tempting. If a company with no relationship to me had brought me this exact scope, I might have considered it. Maybe even accepted it. But this was not isolated. It came after my name had already been spent. Mom folded her arms. What do you want, Aaron? I already told you. No, you told me what you don't want. I want my current role represented accurately. And if we hire you, then you can accurately say I became a consultant again on the date the contract begins. She looked exasperated. Which solves the issue. It solves the future issue. Do you hear yourself? Yes. Everything with you has to be exact. That is literally what you came here to hire me for. The silence that followed was so sharp I almost smiled. Mom looked down at the contract, then back at me. You know what? Maybe this is why Madison does better with people. There it was. The familiar comparison, brought out whenever competence stopped being convenient. Madison was warm. I was difficult. Madison moved forward. I got stuck on details. I looked at the contract again. You're right about one thing. Mom blinked. I'm not the person you need for this. Her shoulders dropped as if I had struck her. Aaron. I closed the folder. I'm not signing. We are offering to pay you. I know. You said that was part of the problem. It was part of the problem. Then what more do you want? The answer surprised me with how simple it was. Consent before using me. Mom's face went blank. I continued. You don't get to decide I'm available and then fix it later by offering money. Her eyes hardened. After everything this company has done for this family, I don't work for the family. It paid for things. Not mine. That stopped her. Robert had helped fund the business early on. Denise's income benefited their household. But my mortgage came from my paycheck, my insurance, my groceries, my retirement savings. The company had never supported me. I had supported it. Mom stood abruptly and picked up the folder. You are making a terrible mistake. Maybe. The network will not wait forever. I understand. Your sister has spent years building those relationships. I understand. There are employees counting on growth. That one reached me. She knew it would. I looked down at my hands. What do you want me to do with that? Kare. I don't care. Then act like it. A familiar guilt spread through my chest. Not fake. Not imagined. There were employees, people with bills and children and grocery lists. Expansion could mean more hours, more work, more stability. I hated that their lives had become a rope tied around my wrist. Then, another thought followed. I had not created the contradiction in the network packet. I had not left the compliance role vacant. I had not told anyone I would support an expansion I had never agreed to support. Caring about innocent people did not require claiming responsibility for decisions I had not made. I'm not stopping you from hiring someone, I said. We don't have time to get someone up to speed. That is a management problem. Mom stared at me, as if I had started speaking another language. You really can live with that? The question was not about employees anymore. It was about whether I could survive being the daughter who did not rescue them. I swallowed. I'm going to have to. She picked up her purse. At the door, she turned. If the expansion falls apart, you will know you could have prevented it. The old me would have chased her into the hallway. Explained. Qualified. Begged her not to think I was cruel. Instead, I held the door open. Good night, Mom. She left. My hand shook after I locked the door. I hated that too. I wanted courage to come with steady hands. Apparently it did not. The next morning, another message from the regional network arrived. They were reconciling the information connected to my role and asked me to confirm one specific representation in their records. The sentence was copied into the email. Aaron Walsh remains available to support compliance implementation during the planned growth period. I read it once, then looked at the date attached to the submission. 2 months earlier. Before the wedding. Before Margaret said my name. Before I knew any of this was happening. That sentence did what anger could not. It narrowed the issue. Someone had not merely failed to remove an old biography. The network had been given a forward-looking statement about my availability. I scrolled to the bottom of their message. They were not asking me who wrote it. They were asking whether it was accurate. I saved the email, then opened my chronology. The dates aligned cleanly. My 6-month engagement. My final handoff. The end date. Denise's acknowledgement. The marketing email approving my continued listing. The capability packet updated 6 weeks before the wedding. The network statement saying I remained available. The wedding. Margaret recognizing me. My correction request. The network's inquiry. I printed the chronology and spread the pages across my dining table. There was no secret account. No hidden recording. No mysterious document dropped into my lap by a stranger. Just ordinary records that became powerful because they agreed with one another. For years, Mom had called my habit of keeping versions obsessive. Madison called it technical. Dad called it something I was just better at. Now the dates gave me a kind of peace none of them could. I did not have to remember the conversation perfectly. I did not have to win an argument. I did not need my mother to admit what she meant. The record only needed me to stop looking away from it. I replied to the network. The representation was not accurate. I had not agreed to remain available during the planned growth period. My engagement had ended on the date already provided. I could not confirm compliance activities performed after that date. I sent the message. Dad came over the following evening. Unlike Denise, he called first. Can I stop by? For a little while. He arrived with nothing in his hands. No folder. No food. No pretense that he was just in the neighborhood. We sat in the kitchen because I did not want another formal conversation across the coffee table. Dad rubbed his palms against his jeans. Your mother told me about the contract. I didn't sign it, I know. He looked older than he had at the wedding. Not sick. Just tired. She shouldn't have told them you were available without asking. I waited. That sentence was more than he had given me so far. Thank you. He looked at the countertop. I mean it. I know. She was trying to get ahead of the expansion. I understand what she wanted. She thought you'd help if they needed you. That's the problem. He nodded slowly. For one hopeful moment, I thought that might be enough. Then he said, but you can still fix this faster than anybody else. The hope disappeared so quietly, I almost admired it. Dad, I'm not saying she was right. You're saying I should absorb the consequences. No. Yes. I'm saying there's the principle of it, and then there's what happens to real people if this drags out. I pushed my chair back slightly. You think I don't know that? I think maybe you're angry enough right now that… Stop. Dad went silent. I rarely interrupted him. The words sounded strange in my own kitchen. I have corrected the information about my role. I have not told the network to reject Walsh Home Support. I have not contacted regulators. I have not tried to damage the business. I have not asked for money. I am refusing to do work I never agreed to do. He looked at me. I know. Then stop talking to me like I'm holding the company hostage. I'm not. That's what this feels like. His eyes dropped. The refrigerator clicked on. And with that sound came a hospital room I had not thought about in months. Dad after surgery. Gray around the mouth. A plastic cup of water on the tray. My hand around his because Mom had gone downstairs to make calls and Madison had said hospitals made her panic. He had squeezed my fingers. What would we do without you? I had carried those words for years. Not as a burden. As treasure. Proof that I mattered. Sitting across from him now, I understood how much of my life I had built around making sure he never had to find out. What would they do without me? Hire someone. Learn something. Wait. Make a mistake. Take responsibility. Maybe resent me. Maybe change. Maybe not. I looked at Dad. I think I spent a long time confusing being needed with being loved. His face tightened. Aiden, I'm not saying you don't love me. Then don't talk like that. That's exactly the problem. He leaned back. I kept my voice calm. If I say something painful, everybody wants me to take it back before we have to sit with it. Dad stared at his hands. I went on. I know you love me. I also know you got used to calling me because I would come. Both things can be true. He did not answer. For once, I did not fill the silence for him. When he left, he hugged me at the door. I hugged him back. Love did not disappear because I had stopped obeying it. Later that night, I drafted one final statement for the regional network. It was shorter than everything else. My consulting engagement with Walsh Home Support ended on the stated date. I had no current consulting or compliance oversight role. I had not agreed to participate in the planned expansion period. I could not attest to activities undertaken after my engagement ended. I read it once, sent it, then I emailed Denise. I will not attend the credentialing review as your consultant, advisor, or compliance representative. Her call came less than a minute later. I watched the phone vibrate across the table. Mum. The screen dimmed, then lit up again. Mum. I let the second call go too. A voicemail notification appeared. I pressed play. Denise's voice filled the kitchen. You don't even have to come anymore. Just send me the checklist you would use. I can handle the meeting myself. I only need to know what they're going to ask. Aaron, please. Don't do this over pride. The message ended. I stood beside the counter with the phone in my hand. Just send the checklist. There it was. The request reduced one more time. Not months. Not a meeting. Not my face in the room. Just my process. My preparation. The thing inside my head she still believed belonged to the household if the need was urgent enough. I did not send it. I did not call to explain why. Instead, I opened the postgraduate application. The statement section was nearly finished. I had written about my years in compliance, the systems I had helped build, and my interest in moving toward leadership focused on quality, accountability, and sustainable operations. For once, I did not mention Walsh Home Support. I wrote about my work, my goals, my next step. There was a final button at the bottom. Submit application. My phone began buzzing again. The family group chat. An aunt wrote that she had heard the expansion might be delayed. Madison replied almost immediately. Mom made one mistake. I don't understand why Aaron needs to punish everybody for it. Dad wrote, please keep this out of the group. Another message appeared. This time from the aunt. Employees could lose hours over this. I hope everyone remembers what really matters. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could have answered every line. Explained that current operations were not being shut down. Explained that I had not contacted the network first. Explained that my name had been used. Explained that one mistake did not stay one mistake when people refused to correct it. I could feel an old reflex warming up. Present the facts. Calm everyone down. Make sure no one thinks badly of me. Then I looked at the unfinished application on my laptop. For most of my adult life, every plan I made for myself had contained an invisible clause. Unless the family needs me. I muted the group chat. Then pressed submit. A confirmation page replaced the application. Thank you, Aaron Walsh. For several seconds, I only stared at my name. The next morning, Denise texted shortly before the scheduled review. They're starting soon. If you don't come, remember, this was your choice. I read it at my desk. A client meeting was already open on my screen. Documents waited beside my coffee. Work that belonged to me. A future I had applied for, without checking whether anyone at home needed something first. My thumb rested above the keyboard. I typed 2 words. I know. Then I turned the phone face down and joined my meeting. The meeting started without me. At 9 that morning, I was sitting in front of a client whose training records had nothing to do with my parents, my sister, or the company carrying my last name. My phone lay face down beside my notebook. I had already read Denise's message. They're starting soon. If you don't come, remember, this was your choice. I had answered. I know. Then I joined my call. Halfway through the meeting, the phone vibrated. Once. Then again. The old reflex moved through me so fast that my hand actually lifted from the table. For years, the appearance of Mom on a screen had outranked almost everything. Dinner, sleep, a movie, a doctor's appointment, my own deadlines. Even conversations with people sitting directly in front of me. Someone at home needed something, so whatever I was doing became negotiable. I lowered my hand. The client was explaining a discrepancy between 2 training schedules. I listened. Really listened. When the call ended 40 minutes later, I had 3 missed calls and 2 messages. One from Dad. One from Madison. Nothing from the regional network. I did not open the family messages first. That small choice felt larger than it should have. I answered 2 work emails, finished my notes, and made coffee before checking the rest. Dad had written, "Call me when you can." Madison's message was longer. "Mom says they're questioning everything now. I hope you're happy." I read it once, then closed the screen. Happy was not the word. My stomach had been tight since breakfast. Part of me wanted the network to say everything was fine, so no one could blame me for anything. Another part wanted the contradiction taken seriously, because otherwise I would have spent weeks defending a boundary nobody respected. Those 2 wishes sat badly beside each other. I did not want Walsh Home Support destroyed. I did not want employees losing work. I did not want Denise humiliated. I wanted something far less dramatic. I wanted the truth about my role to stop being optional. Shortly after lunch, an email from the network arrived. My pulse jumped before I opened it. The message was careful. They thanked me for the clarification I had provided. Their records would be updated to reflect that I was not a current compliance advisor for Walsh Home Support. The planned expansion credentialing would not proceed at that time. Before it could be reconsidered, Walsh Home Support would need to provide updated information identifying current compliance responsibility and corrected materials reflecting its present support structure. That was all they told me. No secret report. No confidential discussion from the meeting. Nothing about licenses. Nothing about penalties. Nothing about closing the company. Only the part that involved me. My name was being removed from a role I did not hold. The expansion was paused until the company could accurately show who did hold it. I read the email again. For weeks, everything had been framed as if I were making some enormous demand. There it was in black and white. The demand was accuracy. I saved the message in the chronology folder. Then I went back to work. Denise called at 6:14 that evening. I watched the screen light up. This time I answered, "Hi, Mom. You got what you wanted." No greeting. No question. Her voice was controlled, which meant she had probably already had time to get past the worst of her anger. "What happened?" "You know what happened. I know what they told me about my role." A sharp breath came through the phone. "They paused the expansion." "I know that. They want updated materials. They want to know who is responsible for compliance. They want proof we have someone qualified handling it." I sat at my kitchen counter. Those details were new. I knew them because Denise was telling me. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "What do you think I'm going to do? Hire somebody." The bitterness in her voice almost pulled an apology out of me. Almost. Instead, I said, "Okay. Okay? Yes. Do you know what outside compliance support costs?" I looked toward the dining table where I had once spread their records across half the surface without billing for the hours. "I have a general idea. You think this is funny?" "No. They're making us redo part of the capability package." That makes sense if it listed the wrong support structure. It was one line. It was a line another organization was relying on. "You always have an answer." There was a time when that accusation would have made me soften my voice. "Not anymore. What do you want me to say?" "I want you to admit you could have prevented this." I was quiet. Because she was right in one narrow way. I could have signed the 90-day contract. I could have attended the review. I could have sent the checklist. I could have made the problem easier to absorb. That did not mean the problem belonged to me. "I could have made it easier," I said. "Exactly. That's not the same as causing it." Silence. Then Denise said, "You wanted your name corrected. Congratulations." "No." "What?" "I wanted my name corrected. I didn't want the expansion paused." Same difference. And there it was. The distance between us reduced to 2 words. Same difference. To Denise, if protecting myself created inconvenience for Walsh Home Support, then I could spend another hour trying to explain why they were not. I had spent 39 years explaining myself to people who benefited from misunderstanding me. "I'm not discussing company work anymore," I said. "Of course you aren't. Now that everyone else has to clean this up." I swallowed. "I'm going to hang up. Eden. I mean it. Your father is devastated." The old lever. I felt it move inside me. Then stop. "Dad can call me. He shouldn't have to be in the middle." "He doesn't." That quieted her. For most of my life, The way to keep Dad out of the middle had been for me to give Denise what she wanted before he had to choose a side. I was not doing that anymore. Good night, Mom. I ended the call. My hand did not shake this time. 3 weeks later, I checked Walsh Home Support's website from my office. Not because I had promised to monitor it, because my own name had been there, and I had a reasonable reason to confirm it was gone. It was. The compliance section no longer listed an individual advisor. It described the company's internal quality processes and noted that outside professional support was retained as needed. Accurate enough. I clicked Madison's bio. The sentence about leading the modernization of the compliance culture had changed too. Now it described her work in community outreach, client relations, and communications. All things she actually did. Nothing in the new version humiliated her. Nothing called her a liar. Nothing declared me the secret genius behind everything. It simply stopped borrowing technical authority from work she had not performed. I stared at the page longer than necessary. I had imagined vindication would feel hotter, more triumphant. Instead, it felt like walking into a room after a loud machine had finally been switched off. Quiet. A message from Madison arrived that afternoon. You could have warned me how bad all these corrections would look. I waited before answering. Not because I was constructing a devastating reply, because I wanted to know whether answering served any purpose at all. Eventually, I typed, I told you my name was being used incorrectly. Her response came almost immediately. You know Mom handles all that stuff. I looked at those words. Once, I would have become the translator. I would have explained Denise to Madison. Explained Madison to Denise. Smoothed the edge. Found language both could tolerate. It was one of my oldest jobs. I typed. Then talk to Mom. Madison called. I let it ring once before answering. What does that mean? She asked. It means, Mom made the decision. You should talk to her about it. So now none of this is your problem? The part involving my name was my problem. You know what I mean. I do. Her voice sharpened. You've changed. A surprising laugh escaped me. Probably. That isn't a compliment. I didn't take it as one. She went quiet. Then she said, the network people asked all kinds of questions after you refused to show up. I wasn't there. I know. So, I'm not going to pretend I know what happened in that room. Mom was humiliated. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was again. Humiliation. The word had not been used when champagne ran down my hair. It had not been used when I was told to stand outside the family photograph. Now it mattered because Denise had been required to explain a business discrepancy. I'm sorry the meeting was difficult, I said. Madison scoffed. That's so corporate. It's also true. You really don't feel bad? The question deserved a better answer. I feel bad that this became a problem, I said. I don't feel bad that I stopped pretending I worked somewhere I didn't. She breathed out. You always have to be right. No. I looked at the revised bio on my screen. I just don't have to be wrong to make everybody else comfortable anymore. She hung up first. I did not call her back. Dad asked me to meet for coffee the following Saturday. He chose a place halfway between our homes, which I noticed because Robert usually suggested somewhere close to his house and assumed I would drive. He was already seated when I arrived. 2 cups sat on the table. Mine was the coffee I usually ordered. That tiny act of attention softened something in me before either of us spoke. Dad pushed the cup toward me. Thanks for coming. Thanks for asking. He turned his paper sleeve around the cup. Your mother hired someone. She told me. Independent consultant. I nodded. They're helping redo the materials and figure out the expansion stuff. That sounds appropriate. Dad gave me a tired look. Apparently this work is a lot more expensive than your mother thought. I pressed my lips together. He noticed. You can laugh. I'm trying not to. His mouth twitched. Then the humor disappeared. Aaron, I owe you an apology. I waited. He looked out the cafe window before continuing. I knew she still talked about you, like you were our backup. The word sat between us. Backup. Not daughter. Not consultant. Backup. I never really questioned it, he said. Why? He rubbed one thumb over the paper cup. Because you always came when we called. The sentence should not have surprised me. It did anyway. Not because it was cruel. Because it was so simple. I had spent years searching for complicated explanations. Mom was controlling. Madison was favored. Dad hated conflict. I was the oldest. The company was stressful. All of that was true. But there was another truth underneath it. They kept expecting me because I kept arriving. I thought if something was too much, you'd say so, Dad said. I did sometimes. Not like this. No. He nodded slowly. I guess I got used to you bending before anybody else had to. That was the closest thing to full responsibility I had ever heard from him. My throat tightened. I love you, Dad. His eyes lifted. I love you too. But I'm not doing that anymore. I know. There was no dramatic reconciliation. No embrace across the table. Just a man in his late 60s, sitting with the fact that his adult daughter had changed the terms of access to herself. After a while, he cleared his throat. There is one thing. I nearly laughed before he finished. What? Do you know anyone your mother could hire who might charge less? I stared at him. Dad had the decency to look embarrassed. I knew that sounded bad as soon as I said it. It sounded worse before you said it. That made him laugh. I did too. Then I shook my head. No. You don't know anyone? That's not what I said. His laughter stopped. Understanding replaced it. Oh? I'm not managing the cleanup either. Dad nodded. Fair enough. That no felt different from the others. Smeller. Asia. Maybe boundaries were others. Smeller. Easier. Maybe boundaries were like muscles after all. The first movement shook. Then, eventually, the body learned. Months passed. Not magically. Not cleanly. Denise and I barely spoke at first. Madison sent occasional messages about neutral things, and then went cold again whenever I refused to discuss the company. Some relatives continued believing I had overreacted. Others stopped mentioning it. Once there was no new drama to feed on. Walsh Home Support kept operating. The expansion remained delayed, while Denise rebuilt the support structure she had claimed already existed. I knew that only through what Dad told me, and what public materials showed. I stopped searching for details that did not belong to me. That was harder than I expected. Being the fixer had made me intrusive in ways I used to call helpful. If a problem existed, I wanted to know enough to solve it. Learning not to investigate other people's messes became its own discipline. My life, meanwhile, began filling the space. The postgraduate program accepted me. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning while I was eating oatmeal at my desk. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the word, congratulations. No crisis had preceded it. No one at home had sacrificed for it. I had applied because I wanted it. That was enough. Several months later, the promotion process at work that had begun before Madison's wedding concluded. I became a senior client lead. Lena congratulated me by dropping another policy packet on my desk. Leadership, she said, means people bring you bigger folders. Excellent. Exactly the dream. She smiled. You earned it. The words landed differently from, you always fix things. One described work. The other had become an obligation. I was learning the difference. At home, I emptied the spare room. For years, 2 banker boxes of Walsh papers had occupied the wall beside my bookcase. Anything that legitimately belonged to the company went back through appropriate channels. Old personal copies I no longer needed were disposed of appropriately. My own contract records stayed in my professional archive. Then I moved the boxes out. I bought a desk slightly wider than the old one. A lamp, 2 shelves. Nothing expensive. The first textbook from my program sat in the center. The room looked almost bare. I loved it. Claire came over one evening and stood in the doorway. So this is what happens when you stop storing everyone else's life. I apparently buy shelving. Rebellion looks different after 35. I laughed. We ordered dinner. The food arrived hot. Nobody called me away from it. That detail still mattered. About 9 months after Madison's wedding, an email from Denise appeared in my personal inbox. I almost did not open it. The subject line was simply, Eden. No emergency. No company name. No request. I clicked. The email was not long. Denise wrote that she had spent months telling herself the expansion problem happened because I had embarrassed her by refusing to help. Then she wrote something I had never seen from her before. She named what she had done, without immediately naming what I had done in response. She said she had left my name on materials after my consulting agreement ended. She had allowed the network to be told that I would remain available without asking me first. She had approved wording that gave Madison more credit for the compliance modernization than her actual role justified, and she understood now that the delay came from those decisions, not from my refusal to make them disappear. I read that paragraph 3 times. The next sentence mattered even more. I am not asking you to come back to the company. My eyes closed. For years, apologies from Denise had always contained a hidden door. I'm sorry, but can you still? I'm sorry you're upset, but your sister needs. I'm sorry this happened, but we have to move forward. This email did not. She asked whether I would consider meeting her for coffee sometime. Nothing more. I did not answer immediately. Growth had not turned me into someone who trusted easily. An accurate apology did not erase decades. It did not restore the Boston opportunity. It did not put me back into the gold photograph. It did not dry champagne from my hair, and it did not require me to punish her forever either. 3 days later, I answered. Coffee. 1 hour. No company business. Denise replied. Okay. We met the following week. I did not decide that day whether everything between us could be repaired. That was no longer a decision I needed to make in one afternoon. If she wanted a different relationship with me, she could build it the way every trustworthy thing was built. Repeatedly. Slowly. Without demanding credit for the first correct step. Almost a year after the wedding, I received an invitation to a professional association dinner. The afternoon of the event, I stood in front of my closet deciding what to wear. Then I saw the black dress. I had moved it twice without putting it on. Once when changing seasonal clothes. Once when I cleaned the closet. Both times, my hand had stopped on the fabric. Champagne. Laughter. Wet black crow. Successful side of the family first. For months, I had thought getting rid of the dress might feel like victory. Instead, I took it from the hanger. The fabric slipped cool between my fingers. Nothing about my body had changed enough to create some cinematic transformation. Same hips. Same stomach. Same shoulders Madison had looked over before deciding black should make me disappear. I put the dress on. It still fit. I looked in the mirror. For a moment, I saw the ballroom. Then it passed. The dress was just a dress again. More than that. It was mine. At the dinner, a woman at the registration table handed me a name badge. Erin Walsh. Senior Compliance Consultant. I pinned it to the same black fabric my sister had chosen because she thought it would make me less visible. Nobody there knew me as Madison's older sister. Nobody knew I was Denise's difficult daughter. Nobody asked whether I could fix a problem for free because blood made the invoice disappear. They knew my work. I had spent years believing independence meant having my own paycheck, my own mortgage, my own keys. I had done all of that since my 20s. It took me much longer to understand the harder kind. The kind where someone you love is disappointed and you do not immediately rearrange yourself. The kind where being needed does not automatically become being responsible. The kind where a boundary can make someone angry without becoming wrong. My phone vibrated inside my purse. I finished the conversation I was having before checking it. A message from Dad. Hope your dinner goes well. Proud of you. Nothing underneath. No second text asking for anything. I smiled and put the phone away. Across the room, people were taking photographs near the association banner. Someone I knew waved me over. Erin, get in here. For one old, reflexive second, I almost moved to the edge. Then I walked toward the center. No one asked me to hide. And this time, I didn't ask myself to either.